Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sarah Radin, and we are excited to be here today to talk to you about the future of analytics and our newly announced Google Analytics 4. So as I mentioned, I'm Sarah Radin. I lead our strategy and commercialization business globally for analytics, and I'm going to let Brittany introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany Osman. I am a global product lead working on Google Analytics, and I'm going to be giving you a quick demo today.
All right, so we have a live chat function for you all to use. So please ask questions as we go through. And we're going to talk to you today about what Google Analytics 4 is. As Britt mentioned, she's going to give a demo, and then we'll have time for some Q&A. So this probably comes from as no surprise for most of you, but users are relying on more data and devices than ever. And we see the average person in the US has 8.4 devices, which is only expected to rise. And that is resulting in a proliferation of data. And at the same time, we are seeing that industry and the regulatory landscape is changing, and it's breaking the ways that data is collected. I know for those of you who are joining us from the EMEA region, this is something you live and breathe every day. And so these changes create new and important considerations for digital marketers. So we see new regulations around the world are raising the bar for privacy. User expectations are rising. So for example, GDPR requires companies to clearly identify each party that may collect, receive, or use user data. And similar regulation could further impact privacy, and we've seen that in some countries and some regions already. And at the same time, web browsers are adding features that limit third-party cookies. We're starting to see this in the app ecosystem as well. And that also impacts ads personalization and measurement. And third-party cookie-based solutions will be limited in their ability to reach users. So audience marketing and measurement solutions, which rely on third-party cookies, may see reduced effectiveness already or over time. So how to navigate this? So to navigate the changing ecosystem and proliferation of data, more companies than ever are investing in analytics. So we recently ran a study that said 50% of businesses say big data and analytics have fundamentally changed business practices in their sales and marketing departments. And so investment in analytics is something that we see as on the rise and something that's critically important to invest in given all of the changes we just talked through. So that's why Google is investing too. And so we're really excited. Yesterday, we made a big announcement that we are introducing a new property type for Google Analytics called Google Analytics 4. And this builds on the foundation of App Plus Web that we introduced about a year ago and brings you a durable, privacy-first cross-channel measurement platform. It's really built to scale with your business and enable prediction and action with Google and beyond. So it's bringing together Google Analytics and Google Analytics for Firebase into a single product. So what are some of the great things that Google Analytics 4 properties enable you to do? So one is unify and deduplicate data across devices. When you think about the current products, it's really hard to bring your app and web data together into a single view. And that's increasingly important given how seamlessly users move between the app and web environments. And so Google Analytics 4 properties allow you to do this in a really unique and I think unparalleled way. The second is derive business insights more quickly. So lots of work behind the scenes from the machine learning perspective, and we'll talk about some of those new features. The third is action on those insights seamlessly. So using Google Analytics to power your marketing through Google Ads, Google Marketing Platform, and other partners such as Salesforce. And then last, thinking about some of the industry and regulatory changes we just discussed, they really allow you to invest in a future-focused and privacy-first platform. So let's go deeper into each of these a little bit. So unified deduplicated data across devices. So this means in Google Analytics 4, you'll see the ability to measure customer journeys that span devices and platforms, so cross-web, cross-app, cross-device, allowing you a full picture of how users interact with your content. And this is based both on Google's data as well as a flexible event collection and data model that Britt's going to talk about a little bit later. So how does this play out in practice? So for example, when you enable user ID, which some of you may be familiar with, which allows you to bring your own first-party data in, analytics can measure journeys that include a visit to your mobile website, a conversion in your mobile app, and help you answer questions such as, are users who start on my app or web more valuable from a lifetime value perspective? The second piece I talked about is the power of Google's machine learning behind your data. So this is something that we talk a lot about as Google, and this machine learning is something that powers Google Analytics in a really unique way. So one of the things we're most excited about in Google Analytics 4 is the ability to surface key insights on user behavior and data through machine learning, automation, real-time reporting, BigQuery export, and analysis. So you'll see things like insights surfaced automatically that help detect anomalies. So I know when I prior to joining Google, used Google Analytics myself, we spent a lot of time digging around to figure out what might be causing a trend or a dip. And this is something we'll be able to surface to you in a really automated fashion based on our machine learning capabilities. It also allows you to ask questions. So the same way you ask Google questions, you can ask Google Analytics questions in natural language to help answer questions or mine the data. And our hope is that it allows you to spend more time on deep analysis and to automate monitoring or automate sort of finding simple queries rather than having to dig through reports. So an example question you might ask is, on what day this year did I have the highest number of users visit my website? And we, through these features, would be able to automatically surface that answer for you. Something else exciting that we recently announced is predictive metrics and audiences. So the ability to predict lifetime value and predict other metrics, like who we think are likely to return to your site or likely to purchase. So doing a lot of that prediction with the hopes that that drives higher ROI for your businesses through our prediction modeling. And one of the pieces we hear most about is deeper and broader integrations with Google and other partners. So that means that Google Analytics 4 will give you the ability to really connect with depth and speed to Google Analytics ads and Google Marketing Platform, as well as third parties, as I mentioned, like Salesforce, to leverage cross-channel data-driven attribution built directly into analytics. So things you might see coming up will be connections to Google Cloud via BigQuery. And we will be offering for those in 360 and SLA in the future for this, which I know has been a top request for a long time. We'll also offer cross ads and GMP integrations, so you'll have interoperability between Google Marketing Platform, Google Ads products, so things like SA360, DV360, and analytics, allowing for actionability, so ability to bid, use audiences, and really work seamlessly across the suite of Google products. And the last piece is privacy safe and future focused. So really applying Google's industry-leading approach to privacy and allowing you to reach your customers. So that means in Google Analytics 4, you'll see new regulatory and compliance data management tools. So more granular privacy controls for user-level data, better signed-in user insights, cookieless measurement innovation. And I know there were some questions we got ahead of time, so we can talk a little bit more about what that will mean. So for instance, one feature that we're really excited about is the ability to toggle your advertising settings depending on the regulatory or legal guidance in a particular region or state. So really allowing you to be nimble or flexible depending on the regulatory environment that you are operating in from a business standpoint. So hopefully that got you excited about some of the core innovation that we have in Google Analytics 4. Lots more to come. So we announced yesterday that it is the future of Google Analytics. It is now out of beta and is the default property type when you go to set up a Google Analytics property. There are lots of features available today and lots that are launching either this week or yesterday have already launched, and many more to come. So we don't have a roadmap to share today, but we do have a really robust pipeline of innovative, exciting features to come for the rest of this year as well as early next year. So please stay tuned. We'll talk about the best way to get started towards the end of this. But now I'm going to pass it over to Britt, who's going to take us through a demo so you can see this great new property type in action.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a product deep dive today. Before we go into the demo, there are 3 key takeaways I'm hoping you get from this. So first, with Google Analytics for properties, there is a new data structure and a new identity space, and we're going to go into what that means. The second being there are similarities within the UI navigation between Universal Analytics and Google Analytics for properties, so it should feel pretty familiar. And lastly, there are new capabilities within GA4 properties, with this being the future, we're continuing to build out new features, as Sarah mentioned. So a few of these features I plan to highlight today are debug view and advanced analysis. So we can hop over to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about the data model. So within Google Analytics for properties, there is a new data structure. So we're moving away from the traditional page view and session-based metrics, which we know all of you Universal Analytics users are probably familiar with since we've been using it for the past 15 or so years. So what we're moving to is an event and parameter model. And while it is different and will take some getting used to, we do believe it opens up a whole new world of possibilities in terms of what you can measure and the additional details you can measure with each event. If you're familiar with Firebase, this model was adapted from Firebase. So in order to allow you to gain that cross-device, cross-platform reporting in Google Analytics for properties, we did need a unified data model between the two platforms. So in Universal Analytics here on the left, you can see we had the underlying foundation being hits here, and multiple hits made up a session, and then multiple sessions made up a user. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the new foundational structure for Google Analytics 4. So there's two basic structures here. The first one is the event structure. So you have multiple parameters under an event. And then you have user properties under a user. So one thing I want to highlight here also with Google Analytics 4 properties is with our new model, many events and parameters are automatically collected. You also have the ability to customize your events, but the automatic capabilities are much easier to get started with right out of the gate. So some examples would be first visit, session start, and page views. And some of the more complex ones we have are scrolling and video views. So I know this is a lot of information about our new data model, but we do believe it's going to be really beneficial in providing some additional capabilities. And I want to jump to the next slide and just show a quick example that we put together. So we did this one with for lead submission. So on the left-hand side, again, you see Universal Analytics. So you have the hit type is the event, and then you're constrained to the category, action, label, and custom dimensions that we have here. And then on the right-hand side is how it would look in Google Analytics for properties. So the event is actually lead submission, and then you have a number of associated parameters tied to this event. And there's no set hierarchy that you're limited to, and you're not limited to only 3 built-in descriptors like we had before. So hopefully exciting and provides more flexibility. All right, so I think we're ready to demo. Amelia, would you be willing to switch over to the demo site? Great. So if you haven't seen Google Analytics for properties before, I'm going to give you a quick tour. So you can easily navigate between your properties. So you just click at the top. It should look very familiar to Universal Analytics. And then the navigation menu on the left-hand side is pretty consistent with what we had in Universal Analytics as well, so it should feel really familiar. From the home screen here, you do have standard out-of-box reporting that highlights right away some of the benefits of Google Analytics for properties. So for example, those automated insights and anomalies that Sarah mentioned are noted here. So I'll just click in so you can take a look. So for instance, here we have recently active users over the past 7 days drove 73.98% of conversions last month. All right, so next I want to talk a little bit about events. So we talked about the event model, so let's take a look at that in the UI. So I'm going to click into all events here on the left-hand side navigation, and this will show us all of our existing events. I am in our Google Merchandise Store demo account, and I don't have full access, so I would have access to all of the parameters associated to each event if I had full access capabilities, but I don't right now, but you should see that in your own property. And you can also mark from in here all of your events as conversions. So what we also have is the conversions report. So if you want to see all of those events that are marked as conversions, they're showing up in here under events and conversions. A couple things to note here. So e-commerce events are automatically marked as conversions. So they would show up here as well. All right, so I'm going to take you into admin next. So admin should also look really familiar and similar to Universal Analytics. So on the left-hand side, you have your account property settings. And then on the right-hand side, you have your property settings. So I'm going to click into data streams first. So this is where you would set up your data streams for your iOS app, your Android app, and your website. If you don't have all three, that's fine, but you do have the option to add those streams in here. And then the next thing I'm going to take you into is the default reporting identity. So this is a new benefit of Google Analytics 4 properties. So you can toggle between different levels of identity reporting. So you could select device only here, or if you want that cross-platform, cross-device analysis, you can use user ID and device. Also within the property settings is where you'd set up the Google signals. So under data settings and data collection, this allows you to leverage that signed in data that provides additional capabilities to activate on. So here you would just turn on Google signals by simply moving the toggle switch. So now that we've gone into admin, I do want to take you through some reporting. So I'm going to go back home. So on the left-hand side nav, you'll see all of the different reports you can access. Under lifecycle here, we have acquisition, engagement, monetization, and retention reports. You also have reports for demographics and technology. So this is where you can get the demographic information that gives you more detail on who your users are or what platforms and browsers they're using. We do incorporate real-time functionality into all of our core reports. But don't worry, we still have real-time reports because we know they're beloved by our users. So you can see the real-time reports are still here. And then moving down the left-hand nav, we also have analysis, which I'll dive into a little bit more later. And then we also have under configure is where you can set up your audiences and your user properties, which I mentioned as part of the data model. So now I want to dive into debug view. So when you're starting a new section of your website or an app, you may get questions around if the analytics are set before you go live. So we know some of our users checked on this through reports in Universal Analytics, but we're now bringing this functionality to you through the Debug View tool. And this tool allows you to see events come in and make sure they're working properly before you launch. You do have to set this up as you're logging some of these events. So on the left-hand side here, this is your minute stream. And this stream shows a series of circles, one circle for each of the most recent 30 minutes. The number in the circle indicates the count of events received in that minute. Clicking on one of these circles populates the second stream, which is just over here to the right. And this allows you to examine the events logged over the last 30 minutes in fine-grained detail. If I click on this, and if we had a number in here, let's say it was 3 or 5, it would show more detail in the second stream. So the second stream by default shows you a list of events logged in the last 60 seconds. Each event displays a timestamp that corresponds to the time of the logging. And you can click in an event to see the list of associated parameters with that event. And then also within Debug View, we show here on the far right. So these are the top events that were logged during the 30-minute period. And then there's also the current user properties table, which shows the latest state of the set of user properties for the currently selected development device. All right, so now we are going to take a look at analysis. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see this okay. So analysis is one of the features we're really excited about with Google Analytics 4 properties. Analysis did exist or does exist in Universal Analytics properties today, but we didn't have that cross-platform, cross-device view. So up here at the top of the Analysis Hub, you will see the templates that we have for analysis. There are quite a few different templates, and there's a lot of flexibility here, so you could spend a lot of time playing around with these, but we're going to go through just a few of them today. So I'm going to click into exploration first. This is probably one that's familiar to many. It's a standard report, looks and works much like a pivot table. So on the far left-hand side, you can see the variable settings. So the date range is here where you can edit the date range for your report. You can also rename it under analysis name. You have segments you can apply directly to your analysis, as well as dimensions and metrics. And then moving over one column is the tab settings. So the tab settings allow you to toggle between the different techniques of analysis as well as visualizations. So here is where you would drag and drop your segments, dimensions, and metrics into your report. And then on the far right-hand side is what we call the reporting canvas. So let's say you want to see how many users are coming from certain countries. So I'm going to create a new exploration here. And we're going to keep active users. And then we're going to double click the dimension on the left-hand side, or we can drag and drop it. And we're going to select country and drag it over. So now we can see our active users by country. So now we can add things like device category and see, let's see where device category is. Here we go. So we'll drag this in. And now we can see that most of our active users are in the United States using desktop, and not far behind is mobile. So we can also add event count as a column. So let's go ahead and drag event count over from our metrics into the columns. Let's see, it's not working. Hold on one second. Okay, there we go, it worked. So now we have our active users, our event counts, and our countries, and our device category all in one view. So now maybe we want to add one of our newer metrics in Google Analytics 4 reporting, which we can add by clicking the plus icon on metrics. And I'm going to search for engaged sessions. I'm going to select engaged sessions here. This is one of my favorites, and I think one of the most interesting ones. So it improves upon bounce rate and time on site, which were developed well before we had hundreds of tabs in multiple windows like we do today. So engaged session tells you if your user was on your website for more than 10 seconds, converted, or had 2 or more screen or page views. So they're a much better representation of engagement. So we just added engaged sessions to our metrics, and we're going to go ahead and drag it over. There we go. So now we have engaged sessions added here. So one thing that's unique to analysis is you can build custom segments right within your reporting canvas. So you can right-click and you can hit Create Segment from Selection. So this brings up our segment. We could build an audience based on this. So we would just check the box and save. And then we'd have it on the left-hand side as well, so we can use it for further analysis. All right, so let's move on to another analysis type. So I'm going to go back. And we're going to look at segment overlap, which is another one of my favorites. So what this does is gives you a high-level overview of how your users cross and align with each other. It defaults here to mobile traffic, tablet traffic, and demographic information, so ages 25 to 54, but you can edit these. So let's create a new user segment. If you noticed from our exploration analysis, so United States was the top country, and then the second one was India. So we have US here. We're going to add an India segment. So I'm going to click on user segment here, and I'm going to search for dimension country ID contains India. We're going to name it India, and we'll go ahead and save. So now we have the India segment here that we can add into our analysis. So we're going to go ahead and remove tablet traffic since it's pretty light. We'll keep mobile traffic, we'll keep the age, and then we'll pull in India to our segment comparisons. All right, so we can see here the overlap between our mobile traffic and traffic coming from India. So it looks like the overlap here of mobile traffic and India is about 3.5 thousand active users. And if we hover over this, again, you can right-click and create a segment based on the selection and build an audience off of this. The other thing we can do here is let's go down to metrics and we'll add in those engaged sessions again. But you could also add things like conversions or transactions, so you have the flexibility to do any type of analysis based on how you've set up your event structure. All right, so now we've added in our engaged sessions view in addition to active users. And one of the interesting things that I found down here was that if we look at all three of these segments, so mobile traffic, their age 25 to 54, and in India is actually 0. All right, so now you've had a quick overview of our overlap report, and I'm going to dive into one final report. So we'll take a look at funnel analysis. So funnel analysis is one that everyone who's been around GA for a while loves from what we know. And with analysis, you can look at open funnels and closed funnels and up to 10 steps. So it adds some additional capabilities to what was in Universal Analytics. So we're in funnel analysis now. One thing I want to highlight here is the steps that were set up. So we have first open visit, and then comes back as an organic visitor. We have session start, screen and page view, and purchase. So this is just a 5-step funnel, but as I mentioned, you can have up to 10 steps. So let's go ahead and add a segment on top of this. So let's add US users so it shows us within the funnel how these break down in comparison. So we'll drag and drop US into our segment comparisons. So now we have a US view. And now we can also add paid traffic in here and see what the difference would be. So as you can see, our organic visitors went down to 0, and so did our session start and screen page view, and that's because they were organic visitors. So that makes sense here. Our first open visit is 100% paid traffic, and then it moves down to 0. So you can play around with this. You can add or remove segments. Again, you can add dimensions, metrics, add additional steps, and adjust your funnel analysis here. So those are some of the new and exciting features of Google Analytics for properties. We also recently released event scoped custom dimensions, which I know was a big request from our users. And there's many more features to come in the coming months and years. So just to recap from our demo, the key things I'm hoping you take away from this today are that we do have a new data structure and event structure that provides more flexibility, and hopefully you saw that through this demo today. Google Analytics for properties look and feel really similar to Universal Analytics, as you know today, so it shouldn't be too hard to pick things up with the new property type. And last but certainly not least, as I mentioned, there's new capabilities available, so go in and test them out yourself, and there's plenty more to come. So I'll pass it back to Sarah to close us out.
Thanks, Britt. Well, hopefully everyone got really excited about Google Analytics 4. If you haven't been in the property type yet, I think a demo is such an awesome way to see all of the latest and greatest things that are to come. So my hope is as you walk away from our time together so far, you recognize that Google Analytics 4 really represents a scalable way to grow with your business. We can measure all of the interactions people have with your brand online, giving you a complete and relevant and timely understanding of the customer journey in that really unique way across web and app. It is adaptable to a changing environment, so we're offering responsible and durable measurement that will drive business outcomes for the long term, while helping you and making sure we're meeting user expectations for privacy. We're providing intelligent business insights, so giving you the opportunity to automate and facilitate insight discovery, making it frictionless to get as much value as possible from your data in as seamless a way as possible. And really driving business impact, so allowing you to more effectively activate your data and insights to drive measurable business outcomes and ROI. So hopefully you're excited, and we have, I think, almost 50 questions, so it sounds like people are excited. So what should you do next? I saw some questions, so I'll just preempt by saying the first step is to set up a Google Analytics 4 property in parallel to your Universal Analytics property and begin collecting data. So in order to do that, you'd either use Google Tag Manager or gtag.js and configure and set up a new property. There is no way to directly one-to-one, let's say, move your historical data or your property. You do need to set up a new property type. And so that's why we're recommending that you run the two property types in parallel so you can begin collecting historical data in the Google Analytics 4 property. And we have lots of awesome Googlers who are ready to partner with you on implementation, on questions. If you want to go deeper, we're not probably going to have time to get to every question today. So if you have follow-up questions, if you work with a partner, a service partner, they're a great resource, and your Google team is always available. And before we move into Q&A, I will just give a quick shout to our Google Marketing Platform team. They offer weekly webinars, how-to tutorials, and a bi-weekly digest of everything going on in Google Marketing Platform. So spans across all of the Google Marketing Platform products. You can use this QR code to sign up today. So hopefully this experience has led you to want to go deeper and learn more. So this is the way to do it. So with that, Britt and I will try to answer as many questions as we can. We have a few questions that came in beforehand, and then we'll take some live questions as well. So I can take this first one. So is Google Analytics going to be replaced by Google Analytics 4? If no, how are you going to still be making updates to Google Analytics, and how do you see the two working together? So I think I touched on this briefly. We do see Google Analytics 4 as representing the future of Google Analytics. It's where we're investing most heavily. It's where you'll see new feature development going forward. That said, we have no immediate plans to change the support for Universal Analytics. So our recommendation is to set up a Google Analytics 4 property and run both in parallel and begin collecting historical data in your Google Analytics 4 property.
All right, I can take the next one,
Great.
Sarah. So what is the role of Firebase? Great question. So Google Analytics 4 brings together Universal Analytics, which is our web, and Google Analytics for Firebase app into one single property. So Firebase will continue to exist as an app developer tool, but this brings together the best of our web and app analytics into one view. Do you want me to take this one too?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So will sessions and page views slowly die? So I kind of mentioned this earlier in the event model discussion. So we're moving away from the traditional session and page view model from Universal Analytics into the event and parameter model. So it is different, but as I mentioned, we do think it opens up new possibilities for measurement. And that said, if these are critical to measure your business, you'll be able to do so within Google Analytics 4 properties, so don't worry.
All right. Does this mean we don't need to use Floodlight as soon as GA can use goals to track conversions? So Floodlight remains a really critical measurement tool and reporting tool for those who are using, in particular, our SA360 and DV360 offerings. So depending on your business goals, we recommend using them in parallel. So the recommendation is not to replace, but rather to use the right tools for your business. And if you need more detail, it's sometimes nuanced depending on the products you're using and the goals that you have from a business standpoint. That's something that your partner or Google counterpart can always provide more insight into. Okay, how is analytics adapting to the changing state of browser privacy controls, i.e. with Safari, ITP, and ETP? So I think that's something that we touched on briefly when we talked about the changing ecosystem and the way we're investing, but we're continuously investing in capabilities to make sure businesses can access durable, privacy-centric, and easy-to-use analytics that work with or without cookies or identifiers. So nothing specific to share at this point, but something that we're thinking a lot about, and definitely an area investment for us, and something you'll see more innovation to come in this quarter as well as in 2021. Do you want to take this one, Britt?
Yeah, I can take this. So how will analytics help us to properly measure YouTube clicks and views on a last click and comparing attribution models? At present, I understand this is limited to single device click only. So great question. YouTube clicks and engaged view conversions, or what we're calling EVCs, will be included in both last click attribution models as well as MTA models and data-driven attribution models when they come online for Google Analytics 4 properties in 2021. So like the rest of Google Analytics 4 properties, YouTube will be trackable cross-device. There's no different treatment for YouTube in terms of cross-device, Google Signals, and user ID. And then we have another one here. So are you planning to make video revenues and reporting from Google Ad Manager available? So we do currently have a closed beta, which involves Google Analytics app-only site stats populating in the Google Ad Manager UI. We will be moving this to general availability in the coming months. In the next milestone of the Google Ad Manager integration, which is planned for 2021 right now, will enable website stats in the Ad Manager UI as well. The reporting integration will allow publishers to optimize for monetization across advertising and non-advertising revenue, to optimize towards user lifetime value, and to derive insights into how advertising impacts user behavior. We'll also be adding audience functionality, which will include the ability to push audiences to Ad Manager for personalization, A/B testing, and personalized site and app experiences.
Great. And then I think this is the last one from our prepared questions that we got ahead of time, so we can jump into live questions after this. What are the cookieless opportunities and challenges for Google Analytics' new version? So first, we plan to offer parity or improve on cookieless solutions, such as measurement protocol and data import, which exist in the product in Universal Analytics today. And in the future, Google Analytics 4 properties will offer additional modes of analytics to support measurement and marketing use cases when first-party cookies or identifiers are not available, for example, by using modeling. So like I mentioned, much more to come there. Nothing more I can share yet, but stay tuned. Okay, so I will hop into the live questions. So one of the live questions we got was around from Eva, is it mandatory to have GTM or use gtag.js? I think I mentioned that briefly, but the answer is yes. In order to set up a Google Analytics 4 property, you would need to use Google Tag Manager or gtag.js. So if we're using analytics.js, we just ask that you deploy the header snippet to begin using one of those products. Hopefully it's easy and seamless. We've designed it to be, so if you have feedback on why it's not, we'd love to hear it. From Phil, can an advertiser use Google Analytics 4 without supplying user ID, i.e. just benefit from Google Analytics 4 signals? The answer is yes. We recommend using user ID as such a rich source of first-party data, and that's so valuable. But if that's not something that your business has, you can certainly use Google Analytics 4 without it. Also from Phil, if you upgrade to Google Analytics 4, does your historical data still show in Google Analytics 4 property reports? The answer is no. So you cannot directly migrate your historical data from Universal Analytics. So that's why it's so important that you begin using them in parallel and begin collecting historical data. As Britt showed you, the data models are fundamentally different. And so we really believe that Google Analytics 4 offers a better data model and a more scalable experience. But it also means we can't port your data over one-to-one from a historical data standpoint. Phil, glad you asked so many questions. Is Google Analytics 4 compatible with Google Analytics 360? Great question. So sorry we didn't touch on this. Google Analytics 4 properties have two property types, a standard property type and a 360 property type. Today, the 360 property type is in beta. So if you're interested in testing it out, that's certainly something that you can begin testing and work with your Google representative to get involved in that beta. And longer term, we will launch that 360 product out of beta and into a full-fledged Google Analytics 4 360 property type. Britt, do you want to take the question from Andy?
Yeah. So from Andy, so your question is, you cannot upgrade a Universal Analytics property to a Google Analytics 4 property. You have to create a new GA4 property. Great question. That is correct. So it's not an upgrade from your existing Universal Analytics property. It is creating a brand new property, a Google Analytics 4 property from within your GA account.
Okay, from Sylvain, any price grid, it's still for free. So the Google Analytics 4 property type for 360 will be a paid product, the same way the Google Analytics 360 product is today. We don't have details yet to share on what the pricing structure will look like, but we will have details to share in 2021 on that. As I mentioned, we're still in beta, so it's still a bit early.
I can take the question from Nick. So Nick asked, will the GA4 property or GA4 demo account on screen now be made publicly available as the demo account for the previous version of GA's demo account is? The parameter reporting and the limitation in GA4 is still a pain like Firebase. I hope this will be improved soon. Thanks for asking this question, Nick. So we are working on an external facing demo account for Google Analytics 4 properties. I don't believe this has been shared yet, but that is something that we're working on, and we'll be sure to make everyone aware when that's available.
I have a question from Angel. I have been using this property for the last 5 months and custom reporting fails frequently. I cannot download them in a PDF. And that sounds like great feedback for us. So this product is still somewhat nascent. As I mentioned, it just came out of beta yesterday. And so if you experience something like that, please do share that feedback with us through your Google representative or through our technical team. That's great feedback for us, and we're always looking to improve. So thanks for the feedback, Angel, and please escalate it through the escalation paths that you have.
All right, we have a question from Phil. So Phil asked, does the GA account number change, i.e. the UA 123456-1, and can an advertiser run a UA and GA4 properties in parallel for a period of time? So the number that you reference, like the UA, it will be, I believe, start with a G now, the measurement ID. We'll start with a G for your Google Analytics 4 property, and you can run your Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4 properties in parallel for the time being. That's actually our recommendation at this time, is to keep using Universal Analytics as your source of truth, but set up a Google Analytics 4 property, start collecting data, get a feel for it, play around in there, and see all the new great capabilities that we have.
Great. Sorry, I'm just looking through all the questions, lots of questions. So thanks for all your engagement. Let's see. From Sophie, any development into impression-based attribution? So that's certainly something that we've thought about and explored. No immediate plans on the roadmap or timing to share, but if you have a particular use case that you think is really critical, that's great feedback to give us as we think about scoping that out and how we might build it into the product longer term. From Elper, when is the enterprise version going to be launched? So as I mentioned, that's in beta right now. So if you're interested in testing it out, please do participate in that beta. And we have plans to launch it likely late next year. From SA, when will Google Analytics 4 and Shopify integrate? That is a great question. That's something we are thinking a lot about. Right now, we are in active discussions with their team and hope to have an integration stood up in the coming quarters.
We also have a question. Is the App Plus Web property basically replaced by Google Analytics 4 properties? Yes. So this is... I will be very transparent. We had some feedback that app and web was confusing. If you don't have an app and a website, many people felt like they couldn't use the property type. So we used Google Analytics 4 properties instead. So it's just a new naming for App Plus Web.
We have a few questions on sampling. So I'll just mention there is no sampling in Google Analytics 4 for out-of-the-box reporting. There is some sampling in areas such as analysis. So that's a really exciting and big change from the Universal Analytics property type. From CR, will there be a tutorial to assist in setting up Google Analytics 4? Yes, so we have a number of training videos, dual setup documentation guides that exist today. So you can find the majority of those through the Help Center and through Analytics Academy. Britt, anything you'd add on that?
No, all of our guides should be on the Help Center now to help you get set up. Our Help Center team has been hard at work trying to put as much information as possible to help with that process. So I would definitely check out the Help Center for Google Analytics 4 properties. You're right, Sarah, there is training in Analytics Academy. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but those are the two big ones I would definitely check out.
From Hitesh, is it a requirement to have the Firebase SDK to access web and app data? So yes, if you are looking to collect both app and web data, you'd need to implement the Google Analytics for Firebase SDK in order to gather app data, and then marry that with the web data from a Pixel perspective to have both.
We got a question from Tiago, but should we use app and web for pure websites? So if you're a web-only customer, you can absolutely use app plus web, now named Google Analytics for properties as well. So you don't have to have an app in order to use it.
Britt, any other questions that you think are critical to answer before we wrap up?
I'm looking through them right now. There are a lot of questions, so thank you all so much for all of the questions and being so engaged during this session. There was one question from Robert asking double tracking is recommended at this stage. So we are recommending that you do set up a Google Analytics for properties to start collecting that historical data earlier rather than later. So that is what we're recommending. So keep using, as I mentioned, your Universal Analytics as your source of truth, but also set up a Google Analytics for properties, start bringing in that data since it's a different data model.
From Kai, when will the SLA between Google Analytics for Firebase and BigQuery become available? That will become available in practice when we launch the 360 version out of beta. So yeah, you can access many of the 360 features during the beta period, but we wouldn't have an enforceable SLA until the full launch period. That would only be available in the 360 product. We do not offer SLAs in our standard product. From Mel, did you mention adding first-party data to combine app and web user data? So user ID is a way to bring in your first-party data to the Google Analytics for property type and into Universal Analytics today. So I did mention that, and that's what I was referring to. A question from Ashlyn, will existing App Plus Web properties ever automatically switch to Google Analytics 4? App Plus Web properties, as Britt mentioned, are one and the same with Google Analytics 4. It's just a new naming convention. So if you've created an App Plus Web property, no action needed to have a Google Analytics 4 property. You've already done it. A question from Daniel about enhanced e-commerce. It sounds like that was problematic for you previously, so sorry to hear that. We've done a lot of work on e-commerce, and we've launched parts of it into Google Analytics 4, and we'll be releasing both further guidance on setting up enhanced e-commerce and e-commerce broadly within Google Analytics 4 properties in the coming weeks, as well as building on the feature set that we already have available. Oh, sorry, I have my cat here. It's a work from home moment for everyone. All right, I'm going to answer one last question, and then I'll ask Britt if she wants to answer any last questions, and then I think we will wrap up. We're in the process of deploying Google Analytics 360. Should we go with Google Analytics 4 instead? So if you're in the process of deploying Google Analytics 360, we recommend that you continue that process, but also deploy in parallel Google Analytics 4 properties so that you can begin collecting data in both properties. If you're a Google Analytics 360 user, there's no additional cost incurred. You don't pay for the hits collected in the beta 360 version of the Google Analytics 4 property type. All right, Britt, I'm going to ask you to maybe answer Tiago's question, since that's an area you spend so much time on.
Yes. All right. So will the migration from the current GA Universal Analytics for current Universal Analytics to GA4 be seamless. We hope that this process is as seamless as possible. And one of the things that our product team is thinking a lot about is how do we build tools to help you with this? So we know that the term migration can be scary for a lot of people and feel overwhelming. And so our team is building out tools over the next few months and the next year to make this process easier. So we did launch this week what we're calling Upgrade to GA4 Setup Assistant. So you will see this within Universal Analytics in the coming weeks. And this will help you get started on the process of setting up a new property. And we're going to continue to build on that over the next few months. So more to come. Keep an eye out for that. And you'll see it on the left-hand nav of your Universal Analytics property within, I would say, the next 2 to 3 weeks.
All right, looks like we got a request from Mel to see the cat. So yes, I'm happy to show you Cleo. Britt knows Cleo well. Here's my cat Cleo. She's a frequent visitor on our Google Hangouts when we do that for work. She loves the camera. She loves attention. So thank you all for the questions. I know we didn't get to all of them. We tried to pick the ones that felt most applicable to the broadest audience. But if you have follow-up questions, please work with your Google teams to get them answered. I know there were some specific questions on the number of parameters and dimensions and some more specific questions to business setup. So we know there's lots to answer. We're here to help, and we really appreciate your time and all the engagement today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.